right, you're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. The American weekly news magazine, Newsweek, has featured Prime Minister Narendra Modi on its cover in its latest edition. Their cover featured the story of India's growth and how the country has changed for the better or for worse under Narendra Modi as the PM of the world's largest democracy. Prime Minister Modi in his interview speaks of India's unstoppable rise. That's also what the article is titled. We are in election season and the PM was asked about his government's track record. He was questioned on India's economic growth and how he plans to make India the third largest economy in the world. He spoke about issues that he's often faced criticism on as well. Basically, issues like minority treatment, foreign policy, particularly vis-a-vis China and Pakistan, and the significance and impact of Ram Mandir. Now, this particular interview did not have the usual tone that such international publications do on Modi. And no wonder, somehow, this interview is turning out to be less palatable to a certain section. At home too, there has been criticism about the responses from the Prime Minister. Opposition leaders lined up to punch holes in what he has said, from accusing the Prime Minister of sidestepping real issues to slamming him for what they called were weak responses. The opposition is confident this interview is not changing any narrative this election season. Now, many even said that this was not an interview at all, that this was a statement of sorts instead. In other words, this piece is getting panned as a soft piece. Now, is that criticism fair just because Narendra Modi was not called divider-in-chief or head of a Hindu nationalist militant party or some such names? We'll take that question to our guests in just a bit. In the 90-minute conversation with three of Newsweek's journalists, the Prime Minister answered questions ranging from major economic advances made in the last 10 years to criticism for allegedly curtailing press freedoms and not taking along the Muslims of the country with him. We take you through some of the highlights from the interview first. Prime Minister Modi was asked about religious minorities and allegations of discrimination, to which these have been his responses. He said these are usual tropes of some people who don't bother to meet people outside their bubbles. Even India's minorities don't buy this narrative anymore, he said. Newsweek quoted him saying that minorities from all religions, be it Muslims, Christians, Sikh, Jain, Parsis, Buddhists, they've all come to India or been in India and have been living and thriving happily. Abrogation of Article 370, questions around it featured in this interview as well. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi urged the interviewers to visit Jammu and Kashmir and witness firsthand the sweeping positive changes happening on ground. He said people are reaping the peace dividend and pointed to significant decline in terror incidents in the valley. He said a new dawn had emerged for Kashmiri women particularly, who now enjoy the same rights as their male counterparts. He spoke about the challenge of sustaining and sharing economic growth as well. Prime Minister pointed to the phenomenal growth of Indian startups. For example, from hardly 100 in 2014, we have over 1.25 lakh now, he told the Newsweek. He said the biggest beneficiaries of India's rapid growth are in fact India's poor. As a result of the robust economic growth, we've been able to run unprecedented welfare schemes, he said. He even pointed to efforts at improving social mobility, extending to different sectors and geographies. Part of his report card on what he thinks has gone right. The answer over India's standoff with China, though, has drawn the sharpest reactions from the Congress party. The party's member Jairam Ramesh took on the PM on the following lines. So, for example, what the PM said on China was that there is a need to urgently address the prolonged situation, and no doubt it has been a prolonged standoff. The Congress has attacked his response as weak and ineffective. PM said that peace can be restored through constructive engagement, but Congress felt that his response is only going to encourage China to claim even more Indian land. Remember, they've been saying China has claimed Indian land. The government has been denying this. PM stressed on the need to put behind the abnormality in the bilateral ties with China. Congress says the response is an insult to our martyrs in a reference to the Galwan clash. And while the Prime Minister said that peaceful and stable ties are important for the entire region, and remember, this is a message not just to China, but even to other countries, not just in the region, but globally, because they are all worried about China. The Congress demanded instead an apology from the government and the PM for deceiving, they say, and for hiding their failures as far as the China front is concerned. Now, China is one big issue. The Prime Minister has faced repeated opposition and international media questions on since 2020. But the evergreen question, the never-ending question he has been asked since 2014, in fact, is the one on minorities. Let me take you through some of his replies to foreign media, especially on the question of minorities. So, to the Financial Times, just a few months ago, in December 2023, he had said the following. While mentioning the success of Parsis, especially in India, he said they have come to India, they have found a safe haven in India and have been thriving. He highlighted this to shine a light on how minorities live happily and prosper in India. His message was that inherently Indian society has no feeling of discrimination against any religious minority, although he did not refer to Muslims particularly in this interview. To Wall Street Journal in April 2023, he had said, people of all faiths found the freedom to coexist in India. For years, all have been existing peacefully and have been prospering together. People of every faith live in India in harmony, was his message at that time as well. So he doesn't talk about his term alone. He talks about the legacy that India has carried, and he continued to do that even in the Newsweek article. Before this one though, he had spoken to Time magazine, and this one is as early as May 2015. So 1 year after he came to power. At that time, there was still an entire climate of apprehension of how his government will be, particularly on Indian Muslims. And he had said at that time that there is only one holy book of reference, the Indian Constitution. Unity and integrity are topmost priorities, he said at that time, and that there is no place for imaginary apprehensions. Now, these have been his answers and the growth of what he has said on the minority question in India. One wonders if he'll ever stop getting those questions. Possibly never. But we are, of course, in election season. The opposition is latching on to every word that the Prime Minister says. The big question we ask today is simply this. As far as this Newsweek interview criticism is concerned, particularly on matters of minorities and even the China question, is the opposition criticism valid and fair?
Claims to have met the Chinese president 18 times. He has met him in Ahmedabad, he's met him in China, he's met him in Delhi, he's met him in Chennai, Mamal, all these places. Why did he give a clean check to the Chinese on the 19th of June 2020?
He will never talk on employment. He will never talk on jobs. He will never talk on communal harmony. He will always talk in terms of majority, minority.
All right, let's go across to our guest joining us. Neeti Jain, spokesperson of the BJP, Aishwarya Mahadev from the Congress Party joining us, Colonel Rohit Dev, security expert, and Atikur Rahman, Islamic scholar, also with us. I do thank you all for your time. Aishwarya, I begin with you. I know the Congress Party has been very critical of the Indian government's stand, respond to China, particularly since 2020. And there have been a lot of differences in what view as the situation on the Eastern Front is versus what the government has said on record. But I want to begin by asking you, did you expect the Prime Minister to say anything else when he was speaking to a foreign publication? I mean, this is a delicate matter. He wasn't going to say much else, was he, on China?
Shivani, you seem to have already given somebody a complete free pass on what they want to say with the foreign press, but let me just complete. We are all Indians. All of us stand for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of India. And when it comes to India facing our enemies or even people at our borders, we believe unequivocally that India needs to take a decisive stand. One. And on the second hand, when you talk about the response, I'm just going to give you a contrast. Where somebody said, 56 inch and La Lang and, spoke about the weakness of certain governments in the past. It is absolutely ridiculous that first of all, this is the US media, so you understand the geopolitical consequences of that. To an international media forum, the Prime Minister had an opportunity to set the record straight on how strong India is. We would have completely supported him on that. Because the reality today, and you don't have to believe the Congress, you can just open up Google Maps and you'll understand what comes under China and what sort of fortifications are around areas of Arunachal. You can listen to the Ladakhi member of parliament from the BJP on what is happening to the land. Or lastly, you can just ask in commonsensical manner, why is a country that has nothing to do in Arunachal renaming city after city? The Prime Minister had an opportunity to send a very strong message to China, even though our trade deficit grows massively and we keep banning apps as a response. So he had a chance to set the record.
And he didn't take it. Okay.
And he did not.
No, let me begin. Let me go one by one and let me bring in Neeti Jain as well. Neeti Jain, opportunity to set the record straight for global consumption, opportunity to give a stronger message to Indian polity and the Indian public, but an opportunity missed. And the Chinese, but opportunity missed.
All right. Shivani, the point is that our foreign diplomacy in the past 10 years has grown from going to US and crying about what is happening inside of our country or with our neighbors and taking their solutions as our own. Our country has stood for whatever they are doing and they have taken very strong stance. This is the Congress party which failed to even build roads around the Chinese borders. In the last 10 years, we have built roads, we have built infrastructure around those borders, and that is what we are doing on ground. We don't need the US or anybody to give us suggestions or sort it out for us. We are sorting out on our itself. I think Modi ji's response was a very statesman-like response on all the questions that you've just mentioned. And this is what needs to be told to the foreign media. You cannot go out and just keep shouting democracy is dead, media is dead, sab kuch mar gaya is desh mein. That is not how you picture India outside of the country, because this is what the opposition is doing. And finally, when we have one person who is giving out a positive image for the country, they have a problem with everything that is happening. They do not understand that the kind of border building that has happened in the last 10 years, the infrastructure that has been created around the border areas, the roads that have been built there, this is all that we are doing on ground to counter whatever issues we have with the border, with the neighbors that we have. And we don't have to go
very quickly, 30 seconds, Aishwarya.
This is what
30 seconds, Aishwarya, then I'll come back to Neeti. 1 second.
While Neeti believes that history began after 2014, you cannot shame the prime ministers and leaders of this country who not only have been the biggest force in Southeast Asia, have spearheaded the non-aligned movement, have been appreciated for whether it was disarmament or maintaining peace. So while you may believe all your history comes from what's happened after 2014, you're factually wrong. And last, you build all the roads you want, ma'am. Tell me what you're doing to stop China building roads, China building strips. Please tell me, from the Depsang Plains to Bangalore, the lakes around there, from the Chicken's Neck to Doklam, I can even show you. Don't believe me. Open up Google Maps and look at what is there. They're building bunkers. They're building concrete, encampments. Tell me what you're doing for that. That is your
Neeti, 30 seconds.
Yeah, first of all, Aishwarya, I did not name any of your leaders. I did not name call anybody because I have that respect. They were prime ministers of the country, and contrary to how you behave with the current prime minister, I respect them. Irrespective of whatever mistakes may have been done, I did not name anybody. But this is the fact that Congress party in however number of years that you were there, you did nothing to secure our borders or make anything strengthen there. The other thing that you're saying, madam, that is quite hilarious because there is nothing we can do on what China does in their part of the country. We cannot say ki aap apne aap ka road mat banao. And I did not interject when you were talking.
It's not interjecting,
I did not interject when you were talking. Why are you getting flabbergasted?
Because you don't know the facts and you're insulting my country. Are you saying renaming places in Arunachal is China? Shivani asked her that.
I am definitely not saying that. The foreign ministry has said that not
places in my country.
Not an inch.
Are you conceding places in Arunachal belong to China?
1 second. Can I come in? I don't want you speaking over each other. As far as renaming, one second, as far as renaming certain parts of Arunachal Pradesh are concerned, I think the Chinese have been at it for a while, and these are antics of the Chinese
And
that
the foreign
have
ministry
happened
has
for a very
responded
long
to
time,
that,
and India has always
even-
given a very befitting response. But that's not really our biggest problem with Arunachal, with China. Actually, we've got bigger problems with
And the
China.
foreign ministry has said that even if you change the name, doesn't make my home
Obviously,
your
that's
home.
that's a childish
Nothing-
attempt that the
nothing has
Chinese
been
make,
taken
and
by
frankly,
China.
the
UK
Chinese
wants
attempts
to
at
agree
the Chinese attempt at slicing and dicing, the Chinese attempt at occupying territory or renaming or claiming territory that belongs to other nations today is known for to all of its neighbors. India is suffering from the same Chinese expansionist syndrome that any of its neighbors do, whether across waters or otherwise. But I want to bring in Rohit Dev as well on the issue of China.
And that not an inch has been ceded to China, and that remains the fact. You may
Okay.
want to believe otherwise. And I think what you need to really explain right now, Aishwarya, is what was that MOU that your party signed with CPC in 2008? That is something that you've never come out and told about it. When Doklam was happening, you were meeting the Chinese higher officials, I don't know for what reason. You were hiding that. Jairam Ramesh says that Modi ji has met the Chinese Prime Minister so many times, but at least he met out in the open.
All right. One second. Let's not speak over each other. I want to bring in our other guests as well. One second. Rohit Dev, I want to come to you. On the issue of China, we know how pesky and how difficult this issue is. You know, Pakistan has been dealt with to a great extent because of the disparities in what India is and Pakistan is, and predominantly economically and also militarily. The situation with China is slightly different. And therefore, the Indian government has to weigh in its responses and even its actions vis-a-vis China. I think we all are mature enough to accept that much. It's not the same situation as any other neighbor. But how do you read the Prime Minister's response? Could he have said more? Could he have assured Indians more, as the opposition is saying?
Shivani, I agree with your analysis to start with. And let me just say initially that the relations with China border in a multifaceted domain. It's not about one incident, one tutu meme, and trying to have brickbats around politically within the country. Geopolitically, it favors India to have that strategic advantage by calling out China's bluff or international fora, even its media, and to showcase that we are the ones who want peace, we want to have resolutions, and that is the aim. Diplomatically with China, we are holding no bars in terms of a mutual relationship. We know where our advantages to engage are. We are accruing those advantages. And where we have disparity of our thoughts, right from the area of difference perception along the LSE to the economic prowess of China and the hegemony around the WTO and otherwise, we are trying to contest and seek an opportunity where China plus one policy helps India. And you have seen the effect in a very silent manner over the last 2.5, 3 years. The third part comes to national security. And there, I dare say that much needs to be done. And it's not about faulting government A or B. The first mistake historically was in the 50s when we, yes, took on the mantle of non-aligned movement, but we made our military so weak, even to the extent that the clothing and the weaponry and the munition was sent to countries in the region of Egypt that time, and we were woefully found wanted during the war. That besides, till the current era, there have been a lot of parallels. You see Russia, China in the same context. They also had a lot of border disputes, sea island disputes. But Russia, from a position of strength in terms of both economy and military, was able to resolve most of the issues. Whereas we do not have that advantage for 4.5 decades of gap, which I dare say economically, and maybe about 3 decades plus of military. You cannot bridge that gap in 2-3 years. When Doklam happened, people like us had cautioned the current government about what the fallouts would be. The fallouts have been, but has the government taken necessary steps? The answer is yes. And I think one panelist was alluding to those measures in terms of building of infra and being prepared in the next 6-7 years. You cannot raise a mountain core tomorrow morning and start talking big. Right? So you have to go in the step formation. We are also doing something to sidestep forces from the theater of the Western theater of Pakistan towards the LSC. And I think that has been happening quite silently, which people in politics may not be aware of. Next
Okay.
element is the economic power and the military power which grow together. It will be naive for any prime minister to tom anything beyond the leverage mandate which he or she has when you have disparity in both the realms with an adversary.
Yeah.
So it's not the same story. I would just like to request one thing. There was a question posed to the Honorable Prime Minister of the day. There has an answer which he has given. And I have heard two comments that it has been ineffective and I think weak. I
Weak, yes.
disagree with that because the Chinese spokesperson has responded within 48 hours in the Chinese territory and termed it in a similar manner. So you have
Yeah,
not
I
only
want to
got a
read that
response.
out. I actually
Right.
do have China's first response to the
Please.
Prime Minister's statement. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has said that boundary issues are not the entirety of China-India relations and should be placed at an appropriate position in China-India relations and properly managed. It is hoped that India and China will meet each other halfway, grasp bilateral relations from a strategic and long-term perspective, insist on enhancing mutual trust, insist on dialogue and cooperation, insist on properly handling differences. So, this is also a China that is less hawkish against India, and it has been so. They've been underplaying these border skirmishes as well because they're also playing to a certain gallery. They also say a healthy and stable China-India relationship is in common interest of both sides and is also conducive to peace and development in the region and the world. Aishwarya, this borders or this mirrors almost exactly what the Indian Prime Minister is saying. One would say this is just how diplomacy is done at the very highest level. The PM is not supposed to take the most hawkish position.
Shivani, you remember when we had our soldiers martyred around the borders, and then our response was very strong from the Prime Minister. His response was banning 56 apps while our trade deficit with our largest trading partner, China, continued to grow. I am not a leader of the same, let's say, stature where I can look at external affairs in the manner that other people do, but I can tell you that on a global fora, the manner in which you speak, the manner in which you react is extremely important, not only for a precedent you set within the country, but also globally. On the same lines of what the BJP said of how people were crying and here and there, I can give you instances of people sitting on swings, walking on beaches, hugging and saying, whatever bhai, ab ki bar, whatever it was.
Okay. Limited time. I haven't even got to the minorities question, so I'll just give Rohit and Neeti both wanted to come in. Yes, Neeti, 30 seconds to you, then Rohit on the China issue, then I'll move on. Yes.
I think you're right, Shivani, that on a diplomatic level, I don't think you can go out and start name-calling each other as countries. This was a very balanced response that was supposed to be given. The second part being whether it was Doklam, whether it was Pulwama, it was the Congress party that was questioning even the veracity of the events that had happened. They refused to believe that it was us who actually did whatever needed to be done to take revenge of whatever soldiers that we lost. So they had no respect for our soldiers, and today they sit here and they're questioning us about what is happening. And thirdly, and my last point, I think we really don't need to take lessons on foreign policy from a party that is not able to handle their own party. I think we're doing pretty well on the foreign and the global level. And we really don't need to take lessons from you because you definitely refused or you did not do anything to handle when you were in power, and we would have benefited much as a country at that time.
Okay, Rohit, very quickly, 30 seconds, you were shaking your head.
Just two very small points.
Yes.
After the Galwan incident, and actually it precedes Galwan, which many people in the country are not aware, India has not even given a befitting reply militarily. It's not about banning apps. Apps also are a national security threat, how they propagate the propaganda. But we also went around and did much more in terms of enhancing our international network for intelligence, for infrastructure development, and also accretion of forces which we could manage within our resources. Having said that, coming to the last point which I wanted to mention, is that the response from the Chinese is not come as some kind of a reciprocal statement. China is under a threat of isolation globally, and India's stature rising there. Prime Minister speaking as a global statesman has put them at a spot where they have to toe this line. And I'm sure they're not going to resolve any border dispute because it's in China's larger interest to keep all border disputes, especially the tripartite kind of them along the borders with our friends, intact. It's in their interest. unless we become so economically powerful and pull out their business that they are made into conditions which they have to operate on.
Yeah,
so I think it's a
I
very
think
good
it's
statement.
fair to say that China is a
last
problem.
One last point.
Very quickly,
One last
Rohit.
point, because I'm in a political debate. I would recommend every political party to take up the same question of the Newsweek, put out what they would have stated in their answer, and let the country decide how politically, geopolitically astute those comments are, how balanced they are. While Jaishankar can say about Arunachal in a press media abroad, the Prime Minister also spoken very strongly against China. So I don't think so. We need to take this much ahead. Let's take an exam.
China
Let's all put
is
the answers.
certainly an issue. It's certainly an adversary. We should never forget that. It has been so and will be so. It's only about how we can beef up our own responses. And of course, the jury is out how the public will take this. I have to move on to the minorities question, which is the other big question the PM keeps facing. And on that, I go to Atikur Rahman. I do thank you for your patience, Atikur Rahman. The minority question keeps coming to Narendra Modi for the last 10 years. Would you say that it is time that we look beyond that question on Narendra Modi? Has his 10 years assured you that he's not what he was made out to be in 2014, for example?
Yeah, you are very correct, Shivani, saying that, in the Hindu Rashtra, there won't be any space for the minorities. So you are quite correct.
No, I didn't say that. I know you're being sarcastic, but please don't quote me wrongfully.
Anyhow, the interview, you may call it, but to me, it's a scripted monologue by the Prime Minister and a sweet pill before the elections. Why the questions were not asked regarding to Bilkis Bano? Who were the people who were, named that they are sanskaris? Were there any questions related to that? Were there any questions related to arrest of Umar Khalid and Siddiq Kappan? Were there any relations related to press freedom in India? No. And even if it is not scripted, then also the Prime Minister never replies. Why he does not address a press conference in India to the Indians? Why a foreign general? We are, abhorring the idea of our Prime Minister giving interviews to foreign journals rather than speaking to our press people. Why not an interview to an Indian, journalist?
Well, he has done interviews to Indian journalists. The press conference is a separate issue, though. Yes, Neeti wants to come in. Atikur Rahman, can I take 30 seconds for a response from Neeti and then I'll come back to you? Yes, Neeti, you want to respond to that? So many glaring issues that the PM needs to answer for on the issue of minorities.
So, with all due respect to Mr. Rahman, he is entitled to his opinion, but I think the Prime Minister has taken a very solid stand on equality, and he has done whatever work that has been done has benefited people from every religion. So this is the opposition that needs to pin this badge of diversification and divisive politics and all of those things because it benefits them. The Prime Minister has always said whatever work is being done, sabka saath, sabka vikas, sabka vishwas is what he has moved with, and that is what he has done. So internal politics, you may have a few questions which would be answered, but if you really think that this was the answer he was supposed to give to the foreign media, I think you're a little misplaced there somewhere. But the Prime Minister's agenda has been sabka saath, sabka vikas, sabka vishwas, and I stand with that. Whatever issues you have, please solve them here.
His schemes and his delivery, which he keeps talking about, the saturation model, speak for themselves. And Muslims on ground, the BJP says, are changing their mindset about the BJP. It's just the usual, he says these are usual tropes of a bunch of people, that they are not letting go of what is essentially a narrative that has changed Narendra Modi since 2002.
To change the narrative, I call upon my Prime Minister with complete strength at his command.
Atikur, please. Atikur. Yeah.
Face the Indian media, face either Ravish Kumar or face Dhruv Rathi. Will he face them? Will he give them an interview? And will he face the questions on minorities? Will he face the question, leave it out about communal things and minorities? Why a rapist is in his party? The restless women, they were struggling, and the Prime Minister had not a thought for her, for the women wrestlers. These hard questions need to be answered. Sweet pills won't work in this election. Neeti.
Neeti, 30 seconds then Aishwarya.
I think it's a little rich that he also has the names of the journalists that the PM needs to interview with. I think that's a little of a stretch. But again, like I said, Mr. Rahman is drawing, he's drawing a narrative and he is entitled to that. But I don't think neither the PM or even I need to respond to that. Sir, we are answering or we are changing the narrative with the work that we are doing.
That's
I think
your
the people
arrogance.
on ground understand that. You go to Jammu and Kashmir, did you see the rally
That's
that
your
happened there of the
arrogance.
Prime Minister? There were people from every religion there and they agree that the development is happening, the tourism is going up, the terrorism is going down. And if those are not the people that you want to listen to or see or the kind of development that is happening, that is on you, sir. I mean, I am not going to come
You're
here and
arrogant.
try and
That's what I
explain to
said.
you. I cannot
It's
wake
a
you up when you're
monologue,
pretending
not
to
an
sleep.
interview.
I think India is moving into a very golden period and we have been doing that very strategically and it is not
That's
going
the
to happen by
monologue,
dividing
Nidhi.
people
That's what I am
on any
calling you
lines. I
out.
know it
You have
works for your
accepted and
agenda
established
to
that
Okay.
because you
but
want
then
to
your
give
connecting
monologue,
you on your
not
agenda is
interview.
not my
Okay,
job,
he's
sir. We
saying
are
this was
working
a
on the
monologue,
journey
not
that
an
we
interview.
see.
Well, it was obviously a question-answer format. But Aishwarya, I want to come to you. There is also a criticism, and many Muslim leaders, scholars, Muslims themselves on ground say this, that while they looked up to the Congress as a party that took care of them, believed in quote-unquote secularism, what did the Congress party do for 50 years, 60 years nearly in power post-independence for them? If Muslims are not doing greatly in India, if that is the contention, then that's, 60 years of Congress rule too. So they also feel that the Congress uses them as a vote bank, but doesn't really deliver much for them.
Shivani, you're far more intelligent as an anchor than to lean into these narratives of what happened in 60 years or not.
No,
But
I'm
let me
saying
answer it
I
in
speak to
two-
Muslims
one
on
second.
ground
Yes,
during
of
elections
course.
particularly, and they say this.
I speak to people from all community on the daily in the rural constituency I live and work in. Let me make two things very clear. At the face of it, I could say 100 different things, including calling myself a supreme leader of any sort of nation or state. Is that the truth? Absolutely. I live in a country where there is constant othering. There is obviously ghettoization. You're seeing basically intimidation and arrest of workers, including journalists, and also the sort of clampdown on freedoms. And that is a reality today. You don't have to believe me. Narendra Modi has spoken to a global press. Look at whether it is Freedom House, look at the global indices of where we're doing with freedom of speech, expression, or even human liberties, and you'll understand the reality. And the second part is, if there is a government or if there is a party that is unequivocally stood for all, irrespective of minority, majority, even if you're a micro minority, it is the Congress party, where my leaders don't go around saying it is about smashan or kabristan, it is about the clothes that you wear and whatnot. And I think lastly, if anybody had to be a prime minister, I would rather be a prime minister that united Southeast Asia and split Pakistan into two, as opposed to somebody sitting on a swing and walking on a beach while also saying that, lal aankh and chappan inch. And that is the reality of today. Post-truth, alternative facts can spread and flood. But the reality of all these years is for everybody in the country and the global platform.
Niti, I don't know about 5 years later, but it is certainly a reality that the minority question is not going away, either from the PM or from the BJP.
Shivani, like the Prime Minister said, there are certain people who are living in a bubble and it is not our job to burst their bubble. This is what I am saying. He did not say that. But again, the point is they're not willing to look out and see what is happening in this country, where we are on a global level. The diplomacy, I think from Aishwarya's reply, I think it's very difficult for them to understand what foreign diplomacy means. But again, not my job to explain it. The interview in entirety was a very statesman kind of an interview, and I think that needs to be that. And
ultimately, you say we are in election season.
Are with you, I think that would result
and
in
while election mandates may not be an answer to everything, but certainly a lot of questions will be answered as the election results pour in. I do thank our guests for joining us.